Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have with us Jennifer Edwards, certified financial planner, financial wellness specialist, advanced training in financial therapy, and the trauma of money and the psychology of money. And we'll learn from her the emotional blocks, societal pressures, and universal habits that shape our financial lives at every income level. We'll learn practical strategies to heal our money mindset, transform financial conversations in relationships, and build genuine confidence. Welcome to the show, Jennifer.
Thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
You're welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form, Jennifer. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll talk about how one can achieve financial wellness as well as heal money anxiety. We'll talk about all this and much more. But before that, let's talk a bit about your journey, your background, so that the audience knows who they are listening to.
Yeah. So I began my professional career after homeschooling and raising my three children for about 20, 25 years. I was full-time homeschooling mom. And then when they were starting to become teenagers, I thought, I really ought to think about the next chapter and what that career might look like. And I've always had an interest in personal finance, managed our own personal finances, and had done a pretty good job. I'd read some books about managing, your investments for your retirement and that kind of thing. And when the 2008 stock market crash hit, I did what I was looking for the right answers and couldn't find them. And so I pulled my money out of the market, which was the wrong thing to do. I'm sure I missed some very high performing days in the period of time between when I took my money out of the market and put it back in. And I looked for a financial advisor, and the confidence and the clarity that came from working with a professional around money was just incalculably valuable. And so that's the path I went for my profession. Worked with a nonprofit firm for about 8 years and helped more than 600 individuals and couples in that role. But what I saw was that for some people, and this happens quite often, changing their financial mindset needed to come before changing their behavior. And there was nothing in my training that really addressed that. And I also saw a lot of cultural differences because we worked with people from across the country in the United States. And there really wasn't this acknowledgement that these different cultural values were out there. It was just sort of the dominant economic culture says this, and so that's what you ought to be doing. And so I stopped working for the firm to do some research and to just kind of dig more into this emotional, psychological side of money. And, now I'm 2 years into starting my business, Breakthrough Financial Wellness. Got a lot of projects going, but one of the biggest things that has really come out of that is the development of my 7-layer financial framework, which really does help us understand that our financial habits and our financial choices are not always conscious choices that we think of in our culture that says, you're individually responsible for where you are financially. And it really doesn't look like that.
Absolutely, Jennifer. Thank you for that. So let's understand. We'll come to the your 7 layers of financial wellness framework also. But first, let's understand what is financial wellness and what is financial anxiety, so that then we can understand it from a common person's perspective.
Yeah, so that it's pretty common occurrence. So most people can relate to this. It's not hard to describe it. Everybody's like, oh yeah, I've actually felt that. Let's start with the problem first. The financial anxiety. It can take many forms, but basically it's anything that is keeping you from achieving the financial life that you're hoping to have, which is not always meaning that you need to have more money. It means having peace and calm and confidence around money. It means not avoiding the conversations around money that you know that you need to have, even if those conversations don't lead to having more money. But it might be conversations with adult children and their parents. It might be parents of younger children and those kinds of conversations, or conversations between partners. So anything that is really kind of keeping you from that, and it manifests itself. Sometimes we think of anxiety as looking really like hyper activity in the body, where we're jittery, or we're, we might shake even a little bit and be like, oh, I really don't want to look at my bills or my budget, or even think about retirement. Man, I'm 48 years old and I haven't saved anything. What does that look like? But it could also be manifest in a shutdown response. So when our bodies are in a stress response, which is often the case around money, it can be manifest itself in fight. So that could be where you're just kind of like ready to take on the world and being like kind of angry about it and just saying, well, forget it all. I'm just going to spend what I want to, and just kind of be really actively fighting against what's best for you financially. Or it could look like flight, which is sort of where you avoid money, where you're just saying, I just don't want to deal with it. You kind of just keep back, let maybe your partner have all of the say in your finances. It could look like freeze, where you're just kind of like not moving forward in ways that you know that you want to. This manifests itself a lot of times in not trying to achieve your career goals, or your investment goals. And then it can also manifest itself in fawning, which is where you're trying to make sure that everybody else is kind of a people-pleasing position. And those kinds of shutdown responses, those all say that there's something about your financial wellness that is not in order, and that we would want to address.
Absolutely, absolutely. I had an understanding that once you have money, that financial anxiety is not there. But you talk about surprising ways
Mhm.
financial anxiety shows up at every income level. Then how do I achieve financial wellness when
Yeah.
financial anxiety is always at every
On
level?
at every level. Yeah, so it's really not so much the anxiety of not having enough. So a lot of us feel that because, especially in the United States culture, the message is you can't really ever have enough. I mean, we have people that are worth more than whole countries, and they're still chasing more money. So that's a cultural ideal of never being satisfied. So that discontentment, that dis-ease around money, is actually another form of anxiety. In the money scripts, mantras, there can be things like money avoidance, money worship, money vigilance, and that vigilance really could manifest itself in more of like a hypervigilance state. And so, even when working with high net worth individuals, we find that it can be very difficult to enjoy spending money. This shows up a lot of times. We've got people who have saved and invested and worked really hard for 30, 40 years, for decades, and then it comes time to retire, and not only have they entwined their identity in this kind of really like go-getting hustler kind of an identity, but then they also find it difficult to enjoy spending those assets down, which is what they were saving for, right? They're saving for a lifestyle where this money supports their lifestyle in retirement. But to watch those account balances diminish, they're used to watching them increase. And when they start to see, oh, my $4 million is going down to 3.8, there can be a high anxiety response, even though we said, we're going to spend $200,000 a year on your lifestyle. So the way to achieve financial wellness is to address the root causes of the things that are coming up around money, which we are not taught to do. People are not taught to explore their money traumas. They're not taught to explore their money beliefs. Why is it so important? In fact, one of the things that happens oftentimes is people with some money trauma, they came from maybe a circumstance where there wasn't enough money. They turn into the hustlers. They turn into the people who are like, I am never going back to that. I'm going to do everything I can to avoid, not having enough financial resources, and maybe become workaholics, maybe become, just really anxious about increasing their net worth. And then that trauma has not been addressed. And so when we finally go in and we work with that part that is, so it's really scared, it's a fearful response. It's saying, oh man, what if I can't feed my family? What if I'm old and I don't have enough resources to sustain my lifestyle, and I have to, it's an irrational fear. But it was born out of childhood experiences when, children have an immature response. They're trying to make sense of the world. Your brain's not fully developed. So we have to, go in and heal those parts, forgive our childhood selves for coming up with the best solution for how to survive in the world that they didn't, completely comprehend. And then we can start to feel some ease around money. And that's what really, those breakthroughs really look wonderful when somebody's like, oh, I can deal with my money. My account balance is going down. I can have this conversation with my adult children about what their inheritance is going to look like. I can be okay with the fact that I got into debt as a young 20-year-old and just not feel that shame and carry that shame forward into my 30s and 40s when I have financial resources, because that shame diminishes our capacity to make good financial choices. And so we really want to diminish any feelings like that.
Absolutely. You talked about money trauma and also talk about money trauma connects us all. So what does it mean? Means does everyone has the same feelings? Does Warren Buffett also has the same sort of
No, it
trauma?
doesn't. No, it doesn't mean that it manifests itself the same way across the board. Certainly, Warren Buffett's money traumas would look different from somebody, maybe a single mom with 3 kids who can't even make ends meet. Warren Buffett would tell you, and it's really interesting in some of his the interviews that he did, how much chasing that level of wealth cost his family. If you look at it, he'll tell you, like I wasn't around a lot, and when I was physically around, I wasn't mentally around. I wasn't really present because I was always thinking about what's the next opportunity and how to analyze, the prospects of a certain investment possibility and things like that. So we idolize people in that because they have this external measure of success that we can identify with. It's harder to measure the other kind of success where, my family relationships are strong, where I feel peace and contentment in my life. This is something that the Indian culture is very good at, recognizing that, you don't have to have a high level of material wealth to have this inner peace, which is when you look at the highest amount of Google searches, it's around how do I be happy? How do I achieve happiness? And that's really what we want. And money should be one of the tools that helps us get there, but money itself should not be the aim.
Absolutely. There are so many words around money. We talked about financial wellness, we talked about anxiety, we talked about money trauma, and then you also talk about financial shame. Help
Yeah.
us understand that. And overall, what is it that you want to tell the world about what you are doing?
Financial shame is one of the things that it's a very low vibrational energy state. So it's going to keep us in attracting things to our lives that we probably don't want, that continue to make us uncomfortable. But financial shame is this state where it's not just that I have created a certain circumstance or I have made a certain decision and maybe it has led to this outcome. Maybe an outcome that I couldn't foresee or that I don't want in my life. It really is about your own identity as a shameful being. And so I try to help people change into the mantra that I can be trusted with money. And this comes from Chantel Chapman, who is really the expert on money trauma. She created the program, The Trauma of Money, that I completed. But I can be trusted with money it's like almost bitter on our tongues, like to say I can be trusted with money. I should attract money to me because I can be trusted with being responsible with it, being a good steward over my financial resources. But when we live in shame, and scarcity feels the same way. So when we have a scarcity mindset, when we feel like there's never enough, when we're not in a state of feeling like I have an abundance. I have an abundance of the energy that I need, the relationships that I need. I have the resources that I need. When we're living in that shameful state, we're actually in the same state as we are in our stress response. And what trauma is where the past experience is still with us in the future. It's still with us today. So if you saw your mom hovering over her table with her bills, and she, and you saw her crying and just really stressed and anxious, and that left an emotional imprint on your nervous system. And so then as an adult, you recoil from doing your bills because it feels like a dangerous thing, like it's just a scary thing to do. That's trauma. And then what comes out of that is poor decision making, because we haven't processed that trauma. And then that leads to our shame, because we're like, oh, I can't be good with money. I don't do the right things. I take on too much debt. I can't seem to keep a budget. People keep passing me up for promotions. I must be lazy and procrastinator. And all of those things then lead us to even worse decision making. Again, we're in that low vibrational state. We're not able to think clearly with our rational brain, which is just like this downward spiral.
Absolutely. Did you, ever face any of these things? In case you did, then how did you manage to do it? If not, then
Yeah.
obviously you are a special person.
Yeah. So I grew up in what would be called maybe a lower middle class income. We always had food. We always had a home, but it wasn't real stable. Sometimes we had to move because rent got too high, or we couldn't afford where we were living. And the food wasn't always high quality. I was raised in the 70s and 80s, and we didn't know what we know about food now. It was a different nutritional guidelines and those kinds of things. And I had I had experiences where I was definitely judged for my financial status in our family. And certain people had decided that I wasn't worth relating to. This is not probably an uncommon experience, where people would be like, you're not wearing the right clothes to be in with the cool kids, basically like that. Even though as a person, I was pretty awesome, but I wasn't wearing the right clothes, right? And so definitely felt that I did not want, most of my decisions in my early adult years were made through the lens of I'm going to create a better financial life for myself. It affected who I welcomed into my circle of friends. It affected my ability to, I really couldn't relax enough to, when I was working, as going to college and working at the same time, it was so hard for me to take time off from work to do something like go on a vacation, like go on a spring break trip, even if it's, we're just camping, we're just driving and camping. We're not we're not going to, some far flung destination that's going to cost a lot of money. But my friends and I would make plans to go on trips, and I had to, literally have them tell me that it was okay to not work that week, because I'm not only am I not making money, but I'm spending money. And that was just a really hard place for me to be in. And it was a good thing. I married a man who came from a household with higher, more financial resources, which wouldn't be surprising when you have financial trauma like me. I was looking for that. I was looking for somebody who was going to bring more financial stability into my life with my husband, my children. But he also taught me and showed me, and he was in the vibration of abundance. And so he would be like, yeah, we can go on trips, and yeah, we can have fun things. He also came from a family where frugality was definitely mimicked, and it was mirror. It was one of those things that his parents, that they said, let's live this way. Modeled. That's the word I'm looking for. His parents modeled frugality, but it was by choice. It was like, we're going to choose the things that are really important to us, and we're not going to, spend money on things that aren't important to us. We're really going to do what's important to us in our value system. So would I say that he's completely healed from his, frugality mindset? Not entirely, but he also was able to say there are things that are worth the money, and it's not wasteful. We're building relationships, we're building memories. When we die, do we really just want to have a bunch of money in the bank and not have had these important experiences as a family and with our friends? And so it took a long time to heal from that. And then when I started to study more about financial wellness and got into meditations and mindfulness and coming to consciousness around these things, which is really asking the deeper question of why. So a lot of times in mental health, they'll say, okay, if you're having an unpleasant thought or a limiting belief come up, then replace it with something. We're going to give you some tools to help you replace that belief. In my suggestions would be, let's find out where that comes from. Where does that limiting belief come from? Where is that dis-ease located? Where is it sitting in our body? What stories have we told ourselves that reinforce that? And then we start to go, oh yeah, this is from that. That doesn't apply anymore. I'm not going to let this rule my life. So it really did come from that. And now I'd say I'm pretty financially healthy. I think my children would tell you that now it's like, okay, I look at things more like what really making that determination of what's the value of this to me? Does it fit within my budget? I've made goals, the goals get funded, but there's also flexibility built in there.
Absolutely, absolutely. You explained that very well, especially the frugality part. That is by choice, and you be frugal in things that you do not actually matter to you, and you actually spend on things that really matter to you, and that is the feeling of abundance. A lot of things there to learn for a lot of people, I'm sure, and they will certainly learn from you. Let's look at the solution that you have got, 7-layer financial wellness framework of yours. Tell us a bit about that so that, even a simple common person can understand it.
Yeah, so the 7 layers really help us broaden and deepen our understanding of where our financial problems lie. I call them our financial hangups. And usually we all have one of them, like, ooh, I really can't spend money on this area and it's causing problems in my relationship. Or, oh, I really shy away from keeping a budget because it just feels like something that's so hard. Even though we do hard things all the time, it's just whether or not we can see the value in them. So the layers run from, I'll go from the highest macro layer down to the smallest layer, and we'll talk about how you can frame your financial hangups inside of this framework. So the top layer is the societal layer. So these are the cultural systems, the values that are the broader culture has. These are systems that affect our ability to be successful with money. I'm sure it's the case in India. It is here in the United States, that the system is created to benefit certain groups of people at the expense of others. And so when we recognize that we are living in this system, and then we say, let's say I'm a woman of color and I have a LGBTQ leaning, the system is not set up for me to succeed. So understanding that my financial situation is a product of all of that can really help us to minimize our shame. And when we understand where that lies, then we can go, okay, A, what can I control? And what do I need to learn to accept? And what can I work toward changing? Then we can say, okay, here's, yeah, we're probably not going to be able to change the system at a macro level very quickly. But we can learn, we're seeing this in the United States right now. The housing costs have increased so dramatically that the system is now not set up for people in their 20s to be able to buy homes. Most people are not going to be able to buy homes in their 20s. And that didn't used to be the case. It used to be the case that, if you had a decent job, and especially if you were partnered, you might be able to own a home in your mid to late 20s. Now it's more like mid to late 30s. So the system is saying this. That doesn't really change what makes a household financially healthy. I'd still say don't buy a home before you're ready. There are certain qualifications that make that as a smart decision, and some that would say, hey, this is kind of setting up for some difficulties in the future if we buy too soon. So that societal layer is affecting us all, and it's affecting us all in different ways depending upon what communities we're coming from, we're members of, our station in life. Unfortunately, our skin color, our hair color, things that don't have anything to do with our what we are actually, our character, um, how thin we are, how able-bodied we are, our sexual orientation. I mean, those are all things that are affected by that systemic societal layer. Below that is our relational layer. So this is more the things that are in our families, our family dynamics, how our family talked about money, the money culture inside of our family growing up, the messages that our caregivers gave us as children, and then how we're interacting with our partners and our roommates and maybe our coworkers and our bosses around money. So there can be things in that layer that make it difficult for us to succeed financially. We need to acknowledge that and then work toward changing them. My programs, we'd work on that a lot. I'm always like, you're not making financial decisions in isolation. You're making them in this family system. So we address the whole system there. The next layer is one that most people would think, yeah, I live in this space a lot, which is the educational layer. Most people think, oh yeah, if I'm not doing something good with money, I need to go out and get more education, financial literacy. Okay, I don't know how credit scores are calculated. I don't know, what's the best way to tackle this debt. I don't know, how should I pay off my student loans, or should I put that money toward investments? But I need some education. And that can be a really important factor in your financial health. But it's just not the only one. And that's where, a lot of people think that this layer and then the next layer, which is behavioral, most people live in those two spaces. They think I need to know more, or I need to be something different. I need to change my habits. So in the behavioral, that is where we're working toward, building up new behavioral patterns. We're looking at, how can we integrate systems into our day that help us to be more financially aware of our circumstances. And then below that is physiological. So this is really giving a nod to that connection between mind, body, and spirit. That, the classic example here is don't go grocery shopping when you're hungry. That's going to affect your ability to make good financial decisions. Don't sit down and do your budget if you're having a physiological, neurological response. Actually, that comes down later in our neurological system. But if you're feeling tired or hungry or bored or angry, it's not a good time to be making important financial decisions. The next layer would be psychological. So this is the money beliefs that we came into adulthood with. Most people do not explore this layer. Society is not acknowledging that, hey, we have these feelings and these thoughts around money that make it difficult for us to succeed with money. And they came out of childhood, and they're sitting under the surface. They're all subconscious. And until we explore them, until we vet them, until we say, do I want this belief in my life anymore? Do I want this value to go with me into my, my future adult life, into my future family? We're not talking about doing that. And so when we have a system that we grew up in that maybe wasn't going to set us up for financial success, and we're feeling like, oh, we're so bad with money, but we haven't acknowledged that psychological layer. So that's the sixth one. And then the bottom one is the neurological. This is kind of related to physiological, but we need to really talk about how that trauma response is something that, unless we are working from it from a trauma standpoint, so talk therapy is not the way that you treat trauma. You're calming your nervous system. It's not going in and like, oh, my parents were this, and oh, my brother hurt me, and oh, this past relationship. That actually can be detrimental to treating your trauma, because you're telling the nervous system over and over again, yes, it's unsafe. Yes, it's unsafe. So yeah, sometimes we'll get into the story and we'll be like, okay, we understand that this is where it is, but then we go and we heal that with very specific techniques unique to trauma therapy.
Absolutely. There's so much to learn about all this from you, Jennifer, and I'm sure a lot of people would want to connect with you, learn more from you about your seven layer framework also. What is the best way for them to do so?
So I'm on LinkedIn, Jennifer Edwards, CFP, if you want to find me there. Breakthrough Financial Wellness, you'll see my business. Breakthroughfinancialwellness.com, that's our website, so you can connect with us there. Book a call. We can just talk about what is the best way to help you through your situation. We have some programs, especially right now we're focusing on young couples. So if you're a young couple just getting started in your finances, it's a really good time to open up this can of worms and talk about all your financial beliefs that you're coming into this relationship with. But I work with families, individuals, couples. So go to the website, book a call with me. Let's talk about how Breakthrough can help you. I'm on all the normal social channels, which I'm sure you'll link in the show notes. But yeah, those are the best ways. You can email us at info at BT financialwellness.com. So info at btfinancialwellness.com. Just say, hey, I'm hoping to have a conversation with Jen. So those are the best channels.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.